This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Forging Table. The mission of Undaunted.Life is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. At the Forging Table, you'll see a group of regular guys forging spiritual resilience by digging into God's Word, and we're welcoming all of you to come along on that journey with us. That's Winkler, that's Horn, that's Dagan. Welcome back. And Dagan, you are coming off an impressive golf thing, and I don't know how else to describe it, but you did a thing on a golf course, and it's the other guy's not happy, you're happy. So what'd you do again? I've already forgot.
Well, it's a 2-day tournament. I beat a guy in match play, so he goes to the loser's bracket, and I get to play someone else who also won today, tomorrow, to see who ultimately gets to just say they're the winner.
All right, well, I'm going to, two things. Number one, I'm going to remind you to speak right into the end of the mount.
Yeah.
And because I know you're distracted because of all the things you did perfectly today, so I just need to critique you to bring you down just a notch. I'm going to ask a question that I can't remember why it's important, but what's your handicap? What is a handicap?
Your handicap, that's a good question. Your handicap is basically how you level every golfer no matter what their ability is.
Okay.
And it's basically a way of saying, like, on a golf course, your handicap determines essentially what your score would be on that golf course. So I'm a 6. So if I play with somebody that's a 14, it's just how we would level by how many strokes that person would get to bring us back to where we could like play a match against.
So it's like if you're a favorite, if you're like a 7-point favorite in a football game, it's like you're giving 7
That's
to start.
exactly right.
Okay, to all of you out there that like know anything about golf, this first like 2 minutes has been absolutely painful for you, and I'm really, really sorry, but I don't watch golf, but like that was a big deal today. That'd be like someone winning a jiu-jitsu tournament and being like, hey, I don't know what that means, but that's kind of cool that you got a medal. So, but before we get into Acts 9, because I'm excited to get into Acts 9, I want to know your guys' favorite conversion stories that you know, where somebody converted to Christianity, because you've heard some extreme stories and things like that out there. So this could be somebody that you know personally. This could be, just a story that you heard of. Maybe you were watching. I know, Ryan, you're a big TBN guy. You love watching TBN. So maybe while you're watching that, you get one of those big conversion stories, heroin needle in the arm, and then all of a sudden you ascended, and then you were halfway between here and there, and then you came back. So does anybody have one that comes right off of the top of your brain? Because I got one, but...
Do false conversions count?
No, that's super lame. What do you mean? Like how would it be? What kind of false conversion?
I was just thinking of Kanye.
Well, yeah, that was fun there for a second. He released a decent album, and then now he has his own porn company.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, maybe he's backsliding.
Delayed sanctification, guys. Delayed sanctification.
What level of backsliding is now I own a porn company? Like that's a little bit different. So let's go with actual conversions as far as we can tell.
I've got one.
All right, Dagan, hit it.
So this is the one that comes into my head. It's the only one that has really impacted me. It was when I was in high school. There's a kid older than me. His name's Chris, and not the worst kid, but like he did drugs, and I think like he wasn't a real happy soul. We had off-campus lunch. He went to off-campus lunch by himself, and on the way back, like he'll describe, he knows, and I know the intersection in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, where this happened, where Jesus just spoke to him, and he left lunch not believing. And he returned to the high school from lunch completely sold out, like Jesus is real, It's
pretty awesome.
And then he felt like Jesus was telling him, you need to join the soccer team because the soccer team is your mission field. And he hadn't played soccer in like 3 years. And he goes out, tries out for the soccer team, makes the soccer tein. They make him captain. They're having Bible studies by the end of the season. Like it is like one of those things where you look at yourself in high school and think, man, like no, God never came to me on my way back from lunch. but just like impactful. I think he's somewhere in the South Pacific, Cambodia or something, like as a missionary, like fully devoted, fully committed, lifelong, but unbelievable story. Just, hey, and I feel like I went to school with him. So did a lot of other believers. We missed the opportunity to share Jesus with him, but Jesus needed him and was like, all right, I'll do it myself.
Okay. And he helped him make the soccer team. So guys, that's how it goes. You become a Christian and then things just start working out for you. That's the guarantee, right?
Sure he wasn't acting because he's a soccer player?
The entire thing was a flop. The entire thing. He totally got you. Okay. What about for the other side of the table? What we got?
Mine's kind of historical.
Hit it.
Martin Luther.
Okay, tell us, it's for those of us that aren't experts in Martin Luther's conversion story. Go ahead and
Martin
get after
Luther
it.
was a Catholic priest, and he believed in the Catholic
whatever
doctrine.
Catechism.
Catechism.
There you go.
And so he thought that it was works that got him to heaven. And so he kept trying to figure out works and kept getting upset with himself. And it was like realizing like, hey, I'm not a good person. You know, like I don't understand how much works do I have to do to make up for the bad things that I do. And then he actually went and read Galatians and was like, oh man.
That was the first book we went over
Yeah.
for a forging table.
It was. And he read Galatians and realized that you are saved by grace, not by works.
Okay.
So that would probably be one of my favorite conversion stories.
And we're pretty sure he wasn't flopping. He wasn't faking it.
He didn't play soccer, so I think we're good.
I mean, he was European though, so it's he's kind of like soccer adjacent almost just by being born on that continent.
Maybe.
Okay, Winkler.
Personal side, when I was in high school, after I was saved, we had this program called Disciple Now, and I invited, like 7 or 8 people to come. All of them were saved that weekend, but the person I was probably most excited about was my little sister, because she grew up Catholic, just like I did. You know, we went through confirmation. You know, we did all the things, but I don't know that either one of us really knew why we were doing it. The friends that I invited, watching them get baptized, it was very, very powerful. But whenever my sister was baptized, I broke down. I mean, that was pretty emotional. So my favorite conversion, and I don't even know if it was really a conversion, but more just like, yeah, now I know, was probably my little sister.
Man,
awesome.
the baptism thing is so cool because I still remember sitting right in front of you, Ryan, at Faith Bible whenever Will was being baptized. Mm-hmm. And it was just such like a cool, like emotional moment to be able to like experience that with somebody. And like, you know, with the boys, you know, Lord willing, with James and Eli, like we're going to freaking have a blowout. There ain't no way I'm letting them get baptized by some random dude at Faith Bible Church in Edmond, Oklahoma. Not hating, just saying, but we are going to freaking get after it.
It was Pastor Jay, which I was really happy it was Pastor Jay.
Great calves on that Pastor Jay Ricer. My God, it's like a guy, that dude has never done a single calf raise and looks like someone stuffed cantaloupes in the backs of his legs. It's just incredible.
But the cool thing is, like, sadly, my son was baptized on his birthday, but usually for a baptism, we like to make it a birthday party.
Oh, yeah.
So unfortunately, he was baptized on his birthday because he wanted to do it as quickly as he could. But like,
it's like having your birthday on Christmas kind of deal.
With our daughter, we're going to do kind of the same thing. It's just like have her baptized, and that's kind of like a birthday celebration.
I mean, I just think that's excellent planning. How are you ever going to forget the date?
Yeah,
also true. Well, because
should have got married on my birthday.
No, here's the thing about that is like, I don't remember the date that whatever your preferred language is, the date that I accepted Christ. I don't remember the date. I remember it was a Sunday. I remember when I was in 10th grade, but I didn't submit it to memory because like I knew my life was forever changed and different from that moment, but I didn't think I was going to, cause I would have been 15 years old. I was 15. So it's like, I don't know to remember these dates. I can barely remember my phone number at that point. And so it's just like that is a cool thing to be able to remember that.
Yep.
I've often wondered like if I had been more consistent after high school, if I would actually remember the date.
Yeah.
Because, you know, go to
Do
college.
You remember the date, Megan?
You know, I've got an old Bible that has the date I was baptized in written
Smarter
in it
than
by
all
my
of
parents,
us.
but I was 8, right? I was 8. So there is this like, you know, conversion really that I think a lot of Christians do. And it's the converting from head knowledge to heart knowledge, right? Like where it actually is like, oh, I get it.
But that's the funny thing. I was baptized when I was like 24. And I don't remember the date or anything, but I can tell you exactly when I became, like when I understood the gospel, and I was like 34 years old, and it was back in Texas, you know? And so that's the sad part is I was baptized at 24, but didn't understand the gospel until I was about 34. It's like 10 years later.
Yeah, I was baptized as a little kid. My mom would like force us to go to the Soul Church of Christ, just, you know, my mom, my sister, and me, and we would go. And then one day she's driving us home, and she's just like, well, you know, y'all think y'all want to get baptized next week? And at the time, the only experience I'd had with baptism was our grandmother. She was like a week away from dying of cancer. And I remember them taking her to a church and getting her baptized. And I was like, and I've said this a lot on the show before, but I was like, oh, so you have sin like all over your body. And then if we know around the time you're going to croak, like we're going to dip you in the water, get all that sin off of there. And then you don't have enough time to accumulate the layers of sin back. Yeah. And then, I was just like, well, what if you get in like a car accident and you're like a real douche before then? Like, how does that work? And so like, I got dipped, but it wasn't until I was baptized as a 15-year-old that it took. Probably my favorite conversion story that I know of personally, and I've said this on the show before, but I know we get new listeners every week, so we're happy you guys are here. Whenever I was in college at the University of Central Oklahoma, I was there from 2004 to 2008. I think in 2007, they got a men's hockey team because of how Title IX works. Like some things are, varsity sports and some have to be like club or something like that. So men's soccer was club and men's hockey was club. And at the time, there's guys from all over the place, but it was mainly people from like Illinois, like Chicago area. And there was like Minnesota. There were some guys from Canada, Michigan, like that type of thing. Well, there was this one guy that was brought in to fight. His name was Kevin Fuka, and his job was to be a defenseman, which was, code for if anyone needs to get wrecked, you're the one to do it.
He was the goon?
Yeah, he was the goon, 100% the goon. And this guy, like he looked terrifying. He had two different colored eyes. He had like a scar over one of his eyes. Like one of his teeth, front teeth was chipped. Tooth was chipped. Very, very, large guy, probably 6'3", 220 pounds, very solid, worked out all the time. And he had a temper, and his temper like had a tail to it. So like you kind of would feel the temper and it wouldn't go away for a long time. Like there would just be stories of he would be at a party having fun, chilling, drinking, whatever. And then he would just pick a guy and be like, you, me, we're fighting. Like he was that just complete, like, just a sawed off human being. Right. And so I graduate and Kelsey graduates, and, we're still living in Edmond at the time. This is maybe 2010 or something like that. And Kelsey and I are at the Walmart here on I-35, and we're like in the produce section getting like, bananas or something. And then right across the produce section, I see him, and everyone just called him Fuchs. No one called him Kevin. Everyone just called him Fuchs. I see him, and he looks me right in the eye and then just immediately starts walking towards me. And I'm just like, oh no, I have no idea what I've done, but he's going to beat me up next to the tomatoes. Like this is going to be.
Kyle, you were actually scared of somebody?
Well, I didn't know how to fight at the time. And so like, again, I'm 22 years old at this point, 22, 23. And so it's like, I had no fight training and like nothing like that. So I'm just like, crap, this is going to be painful and public. And he comes up to me, and if I'm lying, I'm dying. Again, remember telling you he had like kind of crazy eyes and real intimidating. He looked different. And I don't mean like me looking at him, like how he looked at you was different. And he came up to me, he's like, Kyle, Kelsey, it's so great to see you guys. Hey, I accepted Jesus not that long ago. Can I tell you guys about it?
Wow.
So
And I was like, literally, I just got chills, like freaking just doing that story right now. Cause I was just like, what? Are
like,
you?
oh, thank
is this
goodness.
A joke? Yeah. Like, I am so glad that was what you needed to tell me as opposed to what I thought was coming. And for him, there was a chaplain for the UCO hockey team that would just, love on these guys. And some of these guys had never seen a Bible. Like I remember one of the guys from Canada, he was whatever part of Canada that's French, and he had never seen a Bible before. And he's in the dorm room with some of the guys and me and my girlfriend at the time is now my wife, Kelsey. And she had a Bible out, and he goes, hey, do you mind can I like pick that up? And she's like, yeah, why? He's like, I've never seen that's a Bible? I've never seen one before. Wow. And so like, this chaplain is working with that level of type of stuff. And this guy Fuchs, I mean, he was a gangbanger in Chicago. Like he was an enforcer. He helped run girls. Like he was a serious dude. And Jesus just said, nah, playa, and then just snatched this dude up. Mm-hmm. And the last I heard of him, I haven't heard from him. I tried to find him a few years ago. He was helping plant churches like around the country. And it's just like, bro, like just an incredible thing. And so the reason why I kind of wanted to do that is I always like to kind of hear those types of experiences, because Acts 9, we get into probably the most famous of all conversions, considering what came after this. And so let's just dig right into Acts 9. So Jake, if you wouldn't mind, just read the first couple of verses. We'll take a pause and then keep going.
But Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way, men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem.
So just real quick right here, breathing threats and murder. I think something that we lose out on this story, because, you hear about the Damascus Road experience. The Damascus Road is kind of a cultural colloquialism. Like we just kind of say it like, oh, this is just, you're having your Damascus Road experience right now. And there's somehow a come to Jesus moment all wrapped in, at least we say that culturally. But Saul was a terrorist. Like for in any way that you want to describe it, he was Hamas, he was ISIS, he was Boko Haram, he was Al Qaeda. Like that's who he was. And I wrote down this note real quick, and we don't have to camp out here too long because we've got quite a bit to go in chapter 9. But I feel like the reason why he was on the Damascus Road is not talked about enough, because it's such a cultural knowledge. Like we all kind of vaguely know about this story. He was on his way to Damascus to hunt.
Yeah.
Like that's what he was doing. He was hunting for Christians, not to bother, but to imprison, drag back, and to kill.
Yeah. The other thing is here, when they talk about breathing murder, breathing threats and murder, the Greek word here is actually breathing. It's not breathing out; it's breathing in.
Inhaling.
Yeah, like a bull before it's charging. Like
that's what Sproul have read.
Yes,
that. Sproul,
yeah.
Sproul.
And he is so Paul is a hard charging bull. It's relentless. He is pursuing Christians to the end of the earth. He is wiping them all out.
He's ready to attack.
He's doing it because he believes he's serving the God of Israel. So he's doing it in what he thinks is righteousness. Right. And then he, there's the Roman world, and then there's the local governments. And so he has to go get his paperwork, which is what I think is there is strategy, and like he's getting all of his boxes checked by going and getting these like letters basically of extradition from the Sanhedrin, who are basically like saying, go outside of the city and go bring him back. You have our permission.
And they're going to a high priest, and this guy like puts himself into power. So like the high priest, like he wasn't elected. He was like, he found a way to keep himself in power the whole time. And he was the one making the decrees.
Very political.
Yeah, it's a very political move for him to be able to go and do that, especially in Damascus.
Well, and that's what people didn't really realize at that time, Ryan, which was a lot of these guys weren't religious leaders. They were political leaders of a religious sect or something like that.
It's a theocracy, wasn't it?
Right. So that's the difference between like theocracy and theonomy. Theonomy is where you kind of use theology to inform your decisions as a country, whereas theocracy is it is shoved down your throat in an authoritarian style. But I mean, this goes all the way back to the end of Acts 7, where we see Saul introduced for the first time, and they laid down their garments at the feet of the young man named Saul. That's verse 58, and that's just kind of like that's his movie villain entrance, right, where we first see him.
But it's such a pathetic entrance. Like he's holding the coats of these guys getting ready to kill Stephen, and he can't even do it himself. He gives them the permission, and he's like, "Let me hold your coats."
Well, I almost feel like, so maybe that's it. Well, let's kind of open that up, because my read of it, Ryan, is more so like the mafia guy doesn't get his suit dirty.
Yep.
And so it's like, y'all are going to do this for me, but don't worry, I'll hang on to your coats. Because that's where a lot of these mafia guys, it's like they would never perform the murder, but they would still go down for it because they were the one that called for it, but they got some henchman to do it for them.
But I mean, it just depends on the mafia guy, I guess. I mean, if you're like Tony Soprano, he like to do things with his own hands sometimes.
All right,
when you have a right to be vengeful and he believes he has the righteous right to do it, you think he would go and do it himself. Like usually those guys are having somebody else do it because they don't want to come back to them because it's illegal. But this was this was in their eyes a legal kill, and he still couldn't even do it.
Well, I kind of feel like it's potentially in response to Stephen's response to this everything happening, right? Like here's what we're about to do to this guy, and his response to it is not what probably most people would respond. There's no begging, there's no pleading, there's no groveling, and I think that's probably like. There's reason to pause. There's a mindset shift of like, wait, what? Like this guy should be begging right now. And so I kind of feel like maybe there's a little bit of haziness in Saul at the time. And it's like, no, we need to go ahead and knock this out. But I don't know what's going on here.
Well, sure. I don't think so, because the fact is that they look back at Saul for permission. Like if I read that correctly, they look back at Saul for permission.
Number one, I mean, it doesn't say he does throw anything. Doesn't say he doesn't throw anything.
It says he held the coats.
It says he held the coats, but at the same time, I would also go, all right, if he's, you look at that as like, okay, maybe he's hazy. I'm over here going, this dude is stone cold.
Well, so let's actually read.
And
so
it doesn't say he didn't throw the coats.
Right. So let's go right back to 58. Then they cast him out of the city and stoned him, and the witnesses laid down their garments at the feet of a young man named Saul. And as they were stoning Stephen, he called out, "Lord Jesus, receive my spirit." And falling to his knees, he cried out in a loud voice, "Lord, do not hold this sin against them." And once he had said this, he fell asleep. So I guess he wasn't necessarily holding the garments, but they were put down at his feet. And so again, it's kind of, I don't want to read something into the text that's not there, but it's almost like a respect thing. I as you were describing it, as y'all two were going back and forth, I was thinking about Adolf Hitler. I don't know that Adolf Hitler ever had blood on his own personal hands, but he killed 6 million Jews at the same time. Right. And so that's one of those things where, you know, a brown shirt or a SS member or something like that, they probably, if they were doing the execution in front of Hitler, they would have given him some sort of like a you know, acknowledgement of I'm doing this because of your will and direction.
Well, think about just the show of respect that you would lay down your coat in front of somebody so that their feet would not be dirty. I mean, you could almost look at it like that. Like I'm putting my coat down in front of this leader in the Sanhedrin so that he is not unclean by the murder in which we are committing.
I mean, I can see that, but then I think if you read that, it said a young man. So, you know, like how many of these guys are older gentlemen? You know, usually within the Jewish religion, you had more respect for the elders, not for the young people.
Yeah,
so,
it does seem like they are looking to him for leadership, though. It doesn't seem like Saul is a passive actor in this.
I'm reading Sproul's commentary, and Sproul says when we look at the martyrdom of Stephen, Saul of Tarsus was briefly introduced as one who gave consent to the murderous act and stood by and held the garments of those who murdered Stephen.
Okay.
And so that's where that's what I'm seeing it as. And then when I read that he's younger, you know, I was like, I don't know if he's really that mafia boss. That's why I kind of looked at him as like more of a coward.
Yeah, I don't really see that at all. Even from that scroll commentary, I don't get the coward part.
That's well, he's not getting his hands dirty. That's my thing.
But again, like
they look at him for consent, but he's like,
but why would they even look to him for consent if he was just a young fool that they didn't need to care for?
Which would have been which would have been law. So it would have been
and he stuttered under Gamaliel, and so he had some level of.
And so there would be like they got the legal go ahead to do so. So that's, I mean, basically, I guess you could say he's a lawyer that said, yeah, this is legal. Go ahead and do it.
Well, and as a Pharisee, it wasn't Pharisees that were doing the stone throwing. And I guess it was one of those things like the Pharisees wouldn't dare mess up their garb in order to lower themselves to throw a stone at somebody.
You don't want blood on you either because you would be considered unclean and have to do a bunch of other things. So that's right. I kind of agree with Winkler on his thing where they covered his feet so he wouldn't get blood.
Okay, very good. Well, hey, let's keep this rolling. Winkler, if you'll go ahead and read through verse 9, so 3 through 9.
Now, as he went on his way, he approached Damascus, and suddenly a light from heaven shone around him. And falling to the ground, he heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he said, Who are you, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. But rise and enter the city, and you will be told what you are to do. The men who were traveling with him stood speechless, hearing the voice but seeing no one. Saul rose from the ground, and although his eyes were opened, he saw nothing. So they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. And for 3 days he was without sight and neither ate nor drank.
So 3 days, I'm sure that's just a coincidence. But, you know, whenever the voice he heard said, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? I mean, this is evidence of if you are persecuting Christians, you are persecuting Jesus. Yep. And so I don't know that I've heard arguments from people that like, oh, you know, I'm just persecuting the Christians. I'm not really persecuting their God because there is no line of delineation. And this is one of the things that would support that.
Christ made himself synonymous with us in that quote.
Yep.
I think what's really crazy is like he says Saul, Saul. And one thing that I read was that there's only 15 times in the Bible that a name was repeated twice. You got Abraham. I'm not going to go through all 15 , but you got Abraham.
Well, you don't have them memorized?
I don't have them all
Ryan.
memorized. Yeah, you got.
It's in the Sproul book.
Come on.
Yeah, what's that?
It's in the Sproul book.
It's in the Sproul book.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Or it's on my Logos.
Fair enough. We'll just make the point. You don't have to say all the ones.
But, okay. But no, it's like, it's really trying to get his attention. You know, it's not just like, hey, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It's like, Saul, why are you doing this? Like, it's not reading it like, hey, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It's like he's trying to get his attention. He wants him to understand. And then in that term, he makes himself synonymous with Christians. He's like, why are you persecuting me? I mean, Christ already died and rose from the dead at this point. He's already gone through the persecution, but now his church is being persecuted. So he's making himself synonymous with us.
And also you see in verse 5, because you could read verse 5, who are you, Lord? And say like, wait, did he actually see Christ? But in one of the commentaries, I forgot to write down which one, but in 1 Corinthians 9:1, 1 Corinthians 15:8, Galatians 1:16, and Acts 9:27, he basically confirms, no, I saw him. Like, I didn't just hear a voice and all that. Like, I saw him. No one else that was with me saw him. Like, I saw him. Like, it's very explicitly clear other places, but not really right here in this section.
Yeah, he says, "Who are you, Lord?" And I can't remember which commentary pointed it out. It may have been Sproul, but he's using like the master tone of a Lord, not like, "Hey, who are you, Lord?" Like, guy with nice rings.
Yeah.
It's like, "No, who are you, Lord?" Like, I realize this is a supernatural event. And then that's when Christ says, "I am Jesus."
Yep.
Yeah, he knew it. And I mean, the Greek word here, when they talk about the light, the Greek word they're talking about here is not like just a bright light. It's similar to lightning. The light was that bright. Like lightning would a light that would overpower the sun. It was even brighter than the sun. So if this light is being shown to you and there's a voice behind it, you'd be kind of foolish not to be like, all right, Lord, what do you want? Like, what's going on here?
It's usually what people did when there's angels,
It's exactly.
It's like, it's that bright light and they hit the floor. They can't even look at the holiness that is Christ in that point, and then God sends his messengers in a bright light as well.
Well, and when God shows himself to Moses, it's like, all right, you're going to look between these rocks and you're only going to see like my trail, my stank trail that comes behind me. But Dagan, what were you going to say?
Well, it's Paul has been committed to this terrorism.
Yeah.
Town to town. Hey, I got my paperwork's in order and we're going to go. And he's been doing it because he didn't believe Jesus was real. Mm-hmm. So like, you want to talk about an impactful moment where it's like, I'm Jesus. And it's like, oh, crap.
Yeah. My bad.
Dang it.
That's like when your grandma was like,
wait, you've been
is this
watching
where you
the
want to
whole
be
time?
when Jesus comes back?
That has so many weird contexts, but no, that's exactly it. To where it's just like, wait, you've been watching this whole time?
Yeah.
You've been keeping notes, bro?
Yeah. And not only that, but like Jesus comes in and he's like, why are you doing this? It's evidence that he's taking it massively personally.
Yeah,
right?
He shows up
As he
himself.
should.
Hey, I got a problem with by the way, I'm real and I have a big problem with what you're doing.
Yeah, and I knocked you off your stupid donkey too. All right, let's keep Ryan, the horn. Yeah. Let's go 10 through 19.
10 through 19. Now there was a disciple at Damascus named Ananias. The Lord said to him in a vision, "Ananias." And he said, "Here I am, Lord." And the Lord said to him, "Rise and go to the street called Straight. And at the house of Judas, look for a man of Tarsus named Saul. For behold, he is praying, and he has seen in a vision a man named Ananias come in and lay his hands on him so that he might regain his sight. But Ananias answered, Lord, I have heard from many about this man, how much evil he has done to your saints at Jerusalem." Just 13, or do you want me to go?
Just go ahead and read through 19.
Okay. And there he was, and there he has authority from the chief priest to bind all who call your name. But the Lord said to him, "Go, for he is a chosen instrument of mine, and to carry my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel. For I will show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name." So Ananias departed and entered the house, and laying his hands on him, he said, "Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road by which you came, has sent me so that you may regain your sight and be filled with the Holy Spirit." And immediately something like scales fell from his eyes, and he regained his sight. Then he rose and was baptized, taking food, and he was strengthened.
All right, very good. So let's talk about Ananias. So Ananias was one of the leaders of the Damascus church. So he would have been one of the targets of Saul. So as he was coming there, he would have 100% been a target. And, we hear about Ananias and Sapphira earlier in Acts. We don't talk about Ananias being a hero of the faith nearly enough. I kind of feel like Joseph, he gets a bad rap, right? Because he doesn't really have a whole lot of lines, in the Bible and all those types of things. And so he's a minor character. But that guy, staying with Mary and doing all those things and listening to the promptings of God, but also in a different way and perhaps not to the same degree as Joseph. Like Ananias is one of the unsung heroes of the ministry that began at this moment of Saul, who would become Paul. I think super important.
I think he's awesome, but he also questions God.
Yep.
So,
which is fine.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see a problem with that.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, he's like, "Here I am, Lord," which is like, I thought was funny because I was reading Samuel. I read Samuel, and God calls out to Samuel, and he's like, he's hearing him talk, but he has no idea who this is. He's like, "I keep hearing these voices. Eli, I keep hearing these voices." And he goes, "When you hear it again, say, 'Here I am, Lord.'" And that's when he becomes a prophet. And so Ananias is receiving what the Lord is saying by here I am. But then he's like, hey, this guy tried to kill a bunch of people. You sure you want me to go and do this? Like a Jonah moment, And so it's just like, yeah, you don't think Christ knows that? So
yeah, I mean, I don't blame him for at least, hey man, you sure? Like, come on, man. Like, so I'm totally fine with the fact that he paused for a second.
But I mean, I'm totally fine with it too. It just shows like we can sit there. I think when we've had a couple of podcasts before, the one with Matt and everything, and we talk about like, oh man, those guys are stupid. How could they do that? And it's like, how many times have we questioned
we're stupid.
God? Yeah,
yeah.
How many times have we questioned God? Like when I see Ananias do that, it just reminds me of like, man, I am just the same.
But I got to think in Ananias's mindset, it's not that he's questioning God. It's almost like he's like reminding God, like, oh, you must have forgotten. This is a bad dude.
But even reminding God is is no different than like telling God.
No,
just making sure you just trust but verify.
Because hey God, I don't think you know.
Maybe you never know.
You know.
Maybe
I know you're omnipotent, but I mean I don't know.
It's because it's so out of left field, right? Like and then God's response is, no, he's my chosen instrument. And it'd be like, wait, what? Saul?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, who's not the perfect chosen instrument? I mean, Jew and Roman.
Right.
And he's going out
who
to the
understands
Gentiles.
Greek culture.
Yeah, who understands all this culture. Like, and then he's also the guy that persecuted a bunch of Christians. So I get this guy on my side, and with all that he knows, like, yeah, he's my chosen vessel.
Yeah, and it's almost like you're flipping the enemy that understands the enemy.
Yeah.
To a degree. So like when you have, Jack Barsky on the show, he was a KGB agent, spying on the United States. Well, the U.S., intelligence service flipped him to where he became an agent for the United States because he understood to a certain degree the inner workings of the KGB. It's like, all right, well, you've been on both sides of this, so you're going to understand, like, you've been hunting these people for a very long time, so you had to familiarize yourself with them. And now it's like, yes, you're a Pharisee of Pharisees. You are a Roman. You speak Greek. You can write Greek. You understand Greek culture. Oh, by the way, I need you to go spread my word to the Gentiles.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Ananias, to me, I mean, I don't know. He's even himself. He's a tool for the Lord here. And as I'm thinking about, when I was reading through the verses and reading through some commentary, to me, it's interesting that Ananias is the one that is chosen, because to me, there's nothing that remarkable about Ananias. Like, why would the God not send Peter or James or any of the apostles at that point? He sends Ananias, something that, yes, maybe he's a leader in the church in Damascus, but at the same time, he's unremarkable. I mean, there's nothing that stands out about him, and yet that's the tool that is used to convert what I would say is maybe the second most influential person in Christianity behind Jesus.
But does he really convert him other than heal him?
I guess I would say I'm not really looking for, I shouldn't say conversion, but it is I would say it's a tool of the conversion.
Yeah, clearly.
Clearly. He's a tool for the conversion of Paul.
I mean, I would say, I hear you on that. When I think of conversion, I think, yeah, Christ did that.
We know, Ryan. You don't need to explain it. We freaking know. For the last 2 years,
chosen.
We know.
We
know. We're not going there. We're not doing it early. We got more time. So, hey, Dagan, let's hit 19 through 22, sir.
You mean... Oh, 19.
Yeah, 19's kind of like...
It's kind of weird.
Yeah, kind of weird and in between.
And after taking some food, he regained his strength. Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. At once he began to preach in all synagogues, in the synagogues, that Jesus is the Son of God. All those who heard him were astonished and asked, "Isn't he the man who raised havoc in Jerusalem among those who call on his name? And hasn't he come here to take them as prisoners to the chief priests?" Yet Saul grew more and more powerful and baffled the Jews living in Damascus by proving that Jesus is the Messiah.
So I know not all of you have really spent as much time digging into Christian apologetics, or if you're listening to this, maybe you haven't dug into a lot of apologists and their arguments. But if you're an atheist, how do you explain Acts 9:20? How do you explain that? Right, because you go from a guy who is basically at the upper echelons of society doing something that he deems as righteous. He completely flips to the other team, right? And immediately starts proselytizing for that team.
It's a beautiful moment.
This is okay. I think the closest we could do in modern history here. Think about 9/11. Okay. And this would be like Osama bin Laden flies in on a bald eagle with an American flag draped across his back, and he's singing the national anthem and just talking about how much he loves America. That's the level of, the opposite end here. Because if that happened, we would all be like, what in the heck is going on? Which also puts Paul in a pretty unique position here, because he's got the Jews who are like, well, I thought you were my guy.
Right.
Yeah. I thought you were going to come in here clean house. And he's over here. No, you're siding with this other group. And yet the other group's like, I am terrified of this guy. I want nothing to do with him. Keep me away from him. But yet he's saying all the things that we believe.
Well, there are a lot of people out there that don't feel worthy, right? They are living lives that they feel like that they're too far gone, that no one would forgive this. I'm not lovable. I'm not even likable. I don't even like myself. And this is just what a great picture of, well, you can't be too far that Jesus won't come get you. Nope. And, oh, by the way, not only will he come get you, he will use you.
Yeah.
Like, so, this conversion story is really, man, it's impactful because it's for everyone.
Right. It still blows my mind that he was going there to kill Christians.
Yeah.
That's why we don't talk about it nearly enough.
Yeah. He was going there to actually kill Christians. Yeah. And the next thing you know, when he's in Damascus in the square, instead of rounding them up, he's preaching the gospel.
Well, and also, so let's go back to the, Osama bin Laden with an American flag turban all of a sudden. Like, let's just,
that was rough, man.
Right.
Yeah. But I was like, I'm thinking Alfred Pujols in a Cubs jersey.
No. So did you say, wait. Did you say Alfred Pujols?
Alfred.
It sounded like you said
Albert. Was it Albert?
So,
man, my bad. That's why I don't watch
Alfred?
the Cardinals.
Did he say
I don't watch the Cardinals. I think I said Alfred.
I think you may have.
Alfred Pujols.
Albert Pujols.
So no. So Alfred Pujols. So he works for Bruce Banner, and then
Bruce Wayne.
Bruce Wayne.
I did it. You tried to diss me, and you get it wrong too.
Who's Bruce Banner? Who's Bruce Banner?
Bruce Banner's the Hulk. The Hulk. That's Marvel.
Oh my! That's
Bruce
my favorite
Wayne
superhero.
Is DC. I thought your favorite superhero was Thor because you have a crush on him.
No, I mean, I'm not gay, but I would do unspeakable things to Chris Hemsworth. But my favorite superhero is the Incredible Hulk. Man, God, Ryan, we need to pray for each other. Can we stop and lay hands on Ryan and I both? Because neither one of us can be trusted. But so Osama bin Laden flying in on the bald eagle. He's got the American flag turban, all that. The Ric Flair woo T-shirt, all that. How many of us would take that seriously? Like, how many of us would be like, no, you're not, you're not in.
How many of us took Kanye's conversion seriously?
Right.
That's my question.
I'm ashamed to admit.
Hey,
I wanted to believe.
Hey, we weren't friends yet, so I've got discernment.
Hey, so. I did record an episode because people are like, dude, I need you to, this Jesus is King album. We need your response to it, blah, blah. I think I remember at the very end, I was like, I'm very hopeful, but also skeptical. Like, I'm with hope, but like, let's not automatically start crapping on the guys, because all the Theo bro guys, when Kat Von D became a Christian, it's like, well, actually she didn't describe baptism in the right, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, can we stop crapping on the girl? She became a Christian 17 seconds ago. Right. Can we let her take some time to get her language correct?
It's like we've talked about before, where it's like, oh yeah, I chose Jesus. And it's like, don't be the Theo bro that's going to be like, no, Jesus chose you.
Well, and the same thing as well, like when I've talked with Joby before, because, I see this all the time. So Church of 1122 or Joby will post, they did beach baptism earlier this year, and it was like, I forget what the number was, but like 1,400, something. It's like 1,424. So it's a very specific number. And people like, how could you actually know that? How do you know that it wasn't just people going to the water so that they get their picture taken? Like, how do you know that? It's like, well, we're going to count people that make a public declaration of their faith, and we'll let God deal with the details. How about you shut your freaking mouth? He doesn't add that part. I add that part at the end.
We'll go over that in chapter 11. I think that's chapter 11 is going to be like a really good thing for us to go over, like kind of the legalist aspect of conversion in Christianity. But like, I see the same thing happen to Russell Brand. They're like,
he's getting excoriated right now. It's like, why? What is wrong with you people?
I'm just like, hey man, just be excited. I'm excited for anybody. If Kanye got baptized, I was excited for him. Was I skeptical? Yeah, I was a little skeptical, but I wasn't going to say anything. I just sit quietly and let God do his work.
How quick we all become Pharisees ourselves as we have studied the word for years and years and understand our theology better than, probably 90% of America or, the Christian faith. I mean, it's like, we understand this very, very well. and you don't get it because you're brand new. I mean,
Right.
to me, it'd be like, it's no different than I graduated college and I'm judging a kindergartner on how much they don't know.
Well, you brought up Russell Brand, Ryan. A couple of months ago, he posted a picture of Mere Christianity on his desk, and he said, "Hey, who would like to read Mere Christianity with me?" And the comments were just like, "Did you know C.S. Lewis thought this? Could you actually believe this argument? Well, what about that? Blah blah." It's like, okay, Russell Brand not that long ago came out as a Christian, and he's digging into a somewhat difficult book. That can be a very dense book, depending upon how you read it. This is more Old English writing, early 20th century writing. It's not always the most easy to comprehend. He's a smart guy. But what did you say, Ryan? Like walk with him? Yeah, let's just walk. Let him walk a little bit. And so it's like, yeah, hey, I'll read that with you, man. Like that's a very, very impactful book. And let's hope it, helps further your sanctification.
We're always going to question. If you hear a Christian say that they don't question, they're lying, because we all question and we're all learning. Like once we stop trying to learn and think that we know everything, we've lost it.
Yeah, for sure. Let's keep this ball rolling in Acts 9. We're back to Winkler. So let's go 23 through 31.
When many days had passed, the Jews plotted to kill him, but their plot became known to Saul. They were watching the gates day and night in order to kill him, but his disciples took him by night and let him down through an opening in the wall, lowering him in a basket. And when he had come to Jerusalem, he attempted to join the disciples, and they were all afraid of him, for they did not believe that he was a disciple. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles and declared to them how on the road he had seen the Lord who spoke to him, and how at Damascus he had preached boldly in the name of Jesus. So he went in and out among them at Jerusalem, preaching boldly in the name of the Lord. And he spoke and disputed against the Hellenists, but they were seeking to kill him. And when the brothers learned this, they brought him down to Caesarea and sent him off to Tarsus. So the church throughout all Judea and Galilee and Samaria had peace and was being built up, and walking in the fear of the Lord and in the comfort of the Holy Spirit, it multiplied.
So at the end of that section, I mean, we're likely talking about hundreds of small ecclesias, hundreds of small gatherings of churches. But one thing that the MacArthur commentary pointed out is 1 through 31. So verses 1 through 31 of Acts 9, this is several years. Now, when you're reading it, this again, why I tell people I like things like The Chosen that can kind of help slow these stories down a little bit. This may take you 2 minutes to read, but this was years and years and years of life change and behavioral change and growth and sanctification just to get to where we are at this point.
When we did Galatians, remember when he was trying to make his case on who he was, and he talked about being in the desert learning from Christ for 3 years?
Right.
This is that time. Because even I was like, man, how do you jump from this to this? Where was that 3-year gap?
Well, and so I'll bring this up, and I'm doing this perhaps at the peril of sending us way off into left field here, but I do try to steel man the other side of people that are opposite me. So one of the things that has made my abortion talk so strong is because I take the arguments of pro-abortion people seriously. A lot of them are foolish, and most of them are immoral and evil, but I take them seriously because I don't want to knock down the worst versions of their arguments. I want to take all of their best ones. And so when I do that presentation, I take the top 18 draft picks and I destroy them systematically one by one. If I were steel manning the other side, it's okay, Paul, shrewd operator, political guy. He understands multiple different cultures. He could see the groundswell. He could see that this Christianity thing was starting to gain some popularity, and, he wanted to make sure he was on the right side. It's kind of like guys that are supporting one candidate until the other candidate starts getting up in the polls, and now he's appearing at rallies with this guy. And so he goes dark for a while. And the thing is if he goes dark and the Christianity thing falters, he's still a Pharisee, still a Roman, and still understands Greek. So he'll still be able to have his standing. Or if this Christianity thing continues to grow in popularity, then he can come out Team Christian. So again, I'm trying to steel man what somebody might argue as a false conversion. The problem is 1/3 of the New Testament that Paul wrote. The problem is that people don't die for something that they know not to be true. People die for stuff they think is true all the time, but people don't choose to die willingly for something that they know is not true. That's not really something that happens.
They also, to be honest, they fundamentally don't understand Paul at all.
Yeah.
The kind of person that he was. I mean, this is a well-educated member of the Sanhedrin. He had been placed there from Tarsus. His family was prestigious in Tarsus. This was, he had a lot to lose by doing what he did. Even if you actually go back to, well, Christianity flames out, he's not going to be welcome back because he's been preaching against and he wouldn't go back. He wouldn't go back. I mean, he looked at Christians no different than when Moses looked at them worshiping the golden calf at the base of Mount Sinai. He's looking at them the exact same way. That's how they fought. The Sanhedrin was fighting consistently against the secularization and idol worship of the Jews. And they took that seriously.
It kind of reminds me of The Chosen when you watch Matthew's story. And Matthew's like a tax collector. Yeah, he's hated, but he's got all the money. He's got everything that he needs. And he gives it all up to follow Christ.
Right.
And like Saul goes a step further, like you said, like he was a part of a big block of like Jewish culture. And to give that up was giving up more than what Matthew did. You know, he was giving up prestige. He was giving up money. He was giving up headship. He was giving up a lot of things. And so to go in there and just try to be like, you know what, I want to sit here and straddle the fence and see what happens. He wouldn't have had the chance to do that. He's either in or he's out, because if he goes out for a little bit, he's out. I mean, they'll stone him to begin with. So.
Right.
All right, well, let's keep the ball rolling. Ryan, if you will do 32.
Can I just point out one thing?
Please.
Real quick. I just think it's crazy to think, like, when it says, and when he had come to Jerusalem, he attempted to join the disciples, and they were all afraid of him, for they did not believe he was a disciple. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles. Like his reputation precedes him, and like people are like, I don't know about this guy, but Barnabas saw something. Like God opened Barnabas's eyes towards Saul, that he brought him to the apostles. Like, I think that's something we overlook, is that, you know, it's like when we're talking about a Russell Brand, or we're talking about, you know, somebody else like who could come to the conversion. We're like, well, they did this stuff in their past. Like, I can't trust them. But who knows what God's going to do? And Barnabas saw what Christ was doing, and he brought him to the apostles. I thought that was just an amazing thing to look at.
Yeah, and I mean, Barnabas is an advocate.
Yep.
And so I don't know how many times in your life you needed an advocate or you had one. I'm reminded of the story that's described in Fearless, where, you know, the main focus of that, Adam Brown, he was a drug addict. He had a record. He didn't have what it took to just pass the basic entrance to get into the Navy, much less to eventually become a Navy SEAL, much less to join SEAL Team 6 development group. And he had a guy that was an advocate for him. He had a higher up in the Navy that basically said, I will move heaven and earth, and I will sign whatever things I need to sign to ensure that I am able to get you into the Navy, because this is going to save your life, and I think you're going to be fantastic. So having that advocate is such an important thing. So good on Barnabas for noticing whatever it is that he noticed to bring him into the fold.
Well, and Paul had advocates all along the way, right? So on the road to Damascus, he hadn't been traveling with him. So without them, he's blind. He wouldn't get to Ananias. And then he gets to Damascus, and Ananias is his advocate. You know, God comes to him, he puts his hands on his eyes, and you look back in verse 17, and Ananias refers to him as brother Saul. You imagine be like, wow, that's the first words he says to him, and he calls him brother, right? And then it's the believers that rescue him and get him out of the city because people are coming to murder him. And then Barnabas being that advocate to the disciples, right? To be in like, so all along the way, God provided the right people to be that advocate for him.
Absolutely. All right, Ryan, do 32 just through 35.
Okay. Now, as Peter went here and there among them all, he came down also to the saints who had lived in Lydda. There he found a man named Aeneas, bedridden for 8 years, who was paralyzed. And Peter said to him, Aeneas, Jesus Christ heals you. Rise up and make your bed. And immediately he rose. And all the residents in Lydda and Sharon saw him, and they turned to the Lord.
So I guess Peter is Jordan Peterson, like he's just screaming at people, telling them to make their beds. You know, it's important here that Peter is, you know, saying, hey, Jesus Christ heals you. It's not me.
Yeah.
Like this isn't about me. But the other thing that I think with Aeneas here is he was very, very likely alive at the time of this writing. And so I like when we see examples in the scripture of these stories. So when people are like, oh, these are just tall tales, like these are just things that were fables and written, years and years and years after, none of these people were alive. It's like, no, when this was written down, the eyewitnesses that saw the risen Christ, the 500 eyewitnesses, a lot of them would have still been alive. Aeneas would likely have still been alive as well. So it would have been like, oh yeah, I was totally sitting there on that dirty mat, paralyzed. And then Peter's like, nope, in the name of Jesus Christ, get your butt up and clean your bed.
Well, that's the funny part when he tells him to make his bed. I mean, we joke about Jordan Peterson, but like this guy lived on his bed.
Yeah.
Like he never went anywhere. And so to be able to be told to get up and make your bed means that you're not living there anymore, man. You're in a new creation now.
Yeah,
pretty awesome.
And I also look at this as Aeneas is basically a good little microcosm of what it means in our conversion, because he's healed, he's unshackled, and then what's the first thing it's like, and make your bed.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we all get real comfortable. I'm going to read Matthew 11:28 real quick. Come to me, all who labor and who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. We are all very comfortable with that version, but then the very next command generally is now go.
Right.
Or make your bed. You have work to do. That's the sanctification process. So justification is step 1. Step 2 is sanctification. It's time to get to work.
Yeah, this is an insight into Peter's OCD, right? He's like, bro, get up and make your bed.
He's your new creation, man. It's a perfect thing to show like what happens when we are converted to Christianity and when we God opens our eyes to the gospel and we realize it and we see it. Like we are a new creation. We go out and we go, but it's like, make your bed, man. Like you got to go and do this.
One another element to this that just came to mind is, hey, you can make your bed now. So now that is an expectation, which for some people it's like, oh, come on, Dad, I don't want to make my bed. It's like, can you imagine if you couldn't? Like that was not something that you would necessarily, like you could not get up and make your bed. That was not a possible thing. And then all of a sudden you're healed and that's the first thing you're told to do. And it's like, I get to do this. Like, this is amazing. I think I told this on the show before, like a year ago this time, I thought my career as a speaker was over, right? I had 2 vocal cord surgeries. In between surgeries, I couldn't talk above a whisper. It's like, what jobs can you do where you don't have to talk? And then I remember being angry that I had to repeat myself to somebody one time. And I was like, I can't believe they didn't hear me. And I'm like, wait a minute. They can hear me. Like, I had to repeat myself and I'm capable of it. Like, this is a tremendous, tremendous blessing. So now let's go ahead and wrap up Acts 9 with the most unfortunate of all names in the Bible. Let's hear about Dorcas. So
Dorcas means gazelle.
I mean, that's pretty awesome, but the name's still Dorcas. And so, like, they had a rough time in middle school here in the Middle East.
I wonder if it's Greek or if it's the Hebrew version, because they also use Tabitha. So I wonder, that makes me wonder.
No matter what.
Maybe it's not a hard C. Maybe it's Dorcas.
Dorcas.
That sounds like something I'd want to put on my sandwich.
Dorcas.
But
no, I don't want to say that. Forget that.
Ryan, okay.
Sorry,
2 minutes, no talking. All right. Let's go, Dagan. Let's read 36 through the end of Acts 9.
In Joppa, there was a disciple named Tabitha. In Greek, her name was Dorcas.
Well done.
She was always doing good and helping the poor. About that time, she became sick and died, and her body was washed and placed in an upstairs room. Lydda was near Joppa, so when the disciples heard that Peter was in Lydda, they sent 2 men to him and urged him, please come at once. Peter went with them, and when he arrived, he was taken upstairs to the room. All the widows stood around him, crying and showing him the robes and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was still with them. Peter sent them all out of the room. Then he got down on his knees and prayed. Turning toward the dead woman, he said, Tabitha, get up. She opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He took her by the hand and helped her to her feet. Then he called for the believers, especially the widows, and presented her to them alive. This became known all over Joppa, and many people believed in the Lord. Peter stayed in Joppa for some time with a tanner named Simon.
All right. Well, tanner named Simon. He's made his appearance on the scene here, but let's go to verse 41. My version of the ESV says, and he gave her his hand and raised her up. The word that's used here to describe the raising of her is the same exact word to use to describe Jesus' resurrection. And again, when you talk about the Hebrew language or the Greek language or, the ancient Galilean Aramaic that would have been used at this time, like their words were so much more descriptive, and words were not used by accident. And so it's like, I'm trying to remember like the voice that Jesus said when he was telling Lazarus to come out of the tomb. It was the same word used to describe the storm that almost sunk the disciples' boat. And it's like, just think about that. Like the same exact word to, describe a storm where these people that spent their lives on the sea thought, this is it, we're not going to make it, is the same as the voice that Jesus. So he wasn't like, Lazarus, if it's okay, if it's not going to be bothersome to you. And if, I don't want to, hurt your lived experience or anything like that. But if you wouldn't mind not being dead anymore and getting out, that would be great. Like, no, like it was the same word used, like the amount of force. And so the fact that the same word is used to describe what happened with Dorcas and Jesus' resurrection, I think that's really incredible.
Yeah, Sproul actually mentions in his commentary that when he talks about giving, when Peter gave her his hand, that it was actually more of almost like an act of chivalry.
Yeah.
That like this was a woman of honor because she had been faithfully serving the Lord, and that he gives her his hand in order not to aid in getting her out and getting her up. I mean, she's been brought back to life by the Lord. So it's more of a, here's my hand as a place of to honor you as you take these first steps after, being, I guess, undead. I don't know.
I think it's pretty amazing to look at who Dorcas is, or Tabitha is. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other garments that Dorcas made while she was with them. Like, she was taking care of widows. Like, she was being the hands and feet of Jesus.
Yep.
And I think that's something that we lose sight of when she's being raised from the dead. That's a pretty amazing fact. But Dorcas is pretty amazing on her own before she died. Like, she was the hands and feet of Jesus, and these people were weeping her death, and they were showing Peter, like, look what she's done for us. And who knows how many of those widows weren't converts to Christianity? What if they were just Jewish people she was helping, Yeah. And now they become Christians when they see this miraculous thing happen.
I think there's another thing here with Peter. Dude is all sorts of unclean related to the Jewish faith right now.
It's going to get even more.
It's going to get worse before it gets better. But he's all sorts of unclean. He's hanging out with a dead body, and bringing it back to life. But then you also have the fact that he's going to go stay with Simon, a tanner, who is a butcher of animals
around carcasses.
Yeah, it's all the time. So Peter's just basking in uncleanliness right now.
Yeah, he's diving in, but he's gonna.
He'll talk about eating kosher.
No, not anymore. Not right now. But guys, there's certainly more we could talk about with Acts 9, but we are going to leave it there. But everyone come back here next week where we are going to dig into Acts 10. So make sure you are read all the way up through Acts 10. But before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. At Undaunted.Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. Just a quick reminder, we want to make sure that if you want to start your own forging table, that you have the right supplies. So we have partnered with Crossway to create a 5-book set. It's a forging table starter set. There's an amazing journal in there, a study Bible, a devotional, a couple other fantastic books. You can get that entire set for 50% off. Just follow the instructions that are in the show notes. And then also we have a partnership with Logos, which is the most powerful Bible software in existence. So guys, if you want to send your Bible study to the next level, make sure that you are checking out the Logos Bible software, but don't do it for full price. Do it at a discount. Use our code, or actually use our link that will be in the show notes. And also, we are a donation-based ministry. So guys, if you want to know how we keep the lights on around here and how we're able to produce content like this to equip men around the globe to push back darkness, it's because we have guys just like you hopping on board monthly to support us. So please consider doing so. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.